My high school had a program where we could work full-time our senior year. So I became a full-time maintenance technician for another apartment landlord here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and learned a lot about how the business operates and what he was doing. And then used my skill set later on with my brother, who is now my business partner today, to begin buying really distressed foreclosures and use our natural aptitude in the trades to fix them up and then snowball it to where we are today, which fast forward 16 years, we have about 1,400 apartments here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and continuing to grow.
Jered, so excited. Welcome to the Conscious Investor Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate anyone else on the team who's on the back end helping with editing and producing and giving me a platform to share a bit about my story.
Awesome. Well, that would be my 15-year-old son who recently took over production of the show. So congratulations. You getting a shout out, buddy. Jered, we had a great conversation. I love it when, and I always like to be cautious about who guests are on the show because, you want to be mindful of voices that are being amplified and such. You came so highly recommended from multiple people that we have in common that I was like, golly. And then we popped on a call. It was such a great call. I'm so excited to ask you this question because I know where it heads, but the conscious investor, you do not, but I know you know the question. So the question of the day always starts with, what do you do and how did you get started?
Well, I am a multifamily owner operator that happens to use syndication to further that business in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I got started 18 years ago as a maintenance technician. So I was the guy fixing toilets and hanging blinds, and then used that skill set to build a construction company, which then allowed me to have the funds to begin investing in real estate in 2008.
And so you started, if you're watching on YouTube, you probably did the same thing. When he told me that, I was like, so what were you, like 12? Like, you're so, I love stories of, and we're seeing more people that are able to start their investing journey so much earlier. And Conscious Investor, you and I mean, like, wow, we got started what feels like forever later in life, in the commercial space, because we didn't have access to the information in the same way that Jered did. So I'm curious, like, I want to go down this rabbit hole and then infuse, like we could just infuse, more of your story along the way. But how, what was the inclination to get started in the investing side of things? Like, did you just end up at this job, in high school where you're like, oh, cool, I just need a job to, have, discretionary cash and everything. And so I'm going to go do this maintenance job. Like, how did that even come about?
Yeah, I don't know if I should get a ton of credit for having this master plan. It certainly wasn't that. But I was a terrible academic student. So I didn't like school very much. Later learned I'm dyslexic. So reading, writing was never a strong suit. So the academic structure in the traditional sense just didn't fit me. But what I really loved was wood shop. So our school had a wood shop and I was very good at it. So just have a very strong natural aptitude to working with my hands. So by the time I was 14, 15, I was winning lots of awards and doing woodworking and building like high-end furniture, and kind of thought like, how can I use this skill set? While the academic system didn't fit me, I still consider myself like a really smart person and I had the drive and I wanted to be successful, but I just never was really on that, corporate America path because it's kind of built off of the schooling model. So I never got there. But excelling in wood shop, I had a lot of people saying, oh, you should start your own business building furniture. And I didn't want to do that because I saw companies like IKEA and other companies that would just undercut me. And so I said, how can I use this skill set? And I became, while in high school, my high school had a program where we could work full-time our senior year. So I became a full-time maintenance technician for another apartment landlord here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and learned a lot about how the business operates and what he was doing. And then used my skill set later on with my brother, who is now my business partner today, to begin buying really distressed foreclosures and use our natural aptitude in the trades to fix them up and then snowball it to where we are today, which fast forward 16 years, we have about 1,400 apartments here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and continuing to grow.
what a cool story. And my son who's editing this, he loves woodshop and he's great with his hands. So like he loves to build and construct, and that's going to resonate with a lot of people. And I really appreciate how you were valuing that. Yeah, it's not necessarily if there's anything wrong necessarily with the school system. Like some people, that's how they learn. That's not how I learn. And what a healthy approach to not have, angst against it, but to be able to work within it and say, I mean, like I can be super successful and I don't have to have that. I can create my own success.
Yeah.
So at what point did you decide, okay, I want to do this. I want to start investing and I can see the path to building out a big company?
Oh, I mean, we learned through the school of hard knocks and trial and error. So I would say that has developed very slowly through learning, improving, changing things. In the beginning, it wasn't all that sophisticated. So the very first one was a 6-bedroom house that myself and my brother bought. We lived in 2 of the bedrooms. We rented out the other 4, right? That was the that was the entry into the whole thing. And then just continued to work on other people's homes and do like high-end kitchens and bathrooms and additions, and then use those funds from, the construction company that we were building to go buy foreclosures. But like I said, we came out of high school kind of being really driven, being hungry, being not on the corporate path. And so we were looking for those options. And I don't remember exactly what it was. We probably saw some like house flipping shows or something like that. But the wise decision we made was to not flip them, but instead fix them up and rent them out. And once we started to see cash flow, consistent, predictable cash flow coming off of it, we were able to slowly, end our construction company working for homeowners and just focus exclusively on owning rental properties. So there wasn't this big aha moment. It was over many years of kind of saying, hey, this is working. This is really working. And just continuing to double down on the same thing.
It's so important to be able to see, the trends, to see where they're heading and to see what's working. Now, it's interesting. There's a shift that is taking place, and there aren't very many people I've had on the show that can speak to this. And so conscious investor, this might help one of your kids who's, this is not where Jered's at. We have to flash back on this, but I mean, you might have someone that's a teenager getting ready to leave the nest or just leaving the nest saying, I'm not going the college route. What was that like? What was the resistance like that you faced, if any at all, from peers and from just within your social community and such?
So you made a comment earlier where you said like, good for you for not like kind of letting that not fitting the academic system, not kind of wear you down. I would say that credit should all go to my parents, right? So I had super supportive parents that kind of saw like, this isn't for you, and just simply encouraged me to say, you don't like school, but what you are learning is how to get through something that's difficult for you. And so you don't have to get A's, but you do have to get through. And so they would reframe it to me of like, what you're learning is how to do something hard. You're not like, we don't care about the calculus or the algebra. We care about you figuring out how to make it through. And then they did things like, bought me tools and filled our garage with a wood shop. And so just, they really poured into what I was good at. And so the credit should go to them, because I think if I had a different upbringing, the result could have easily been very different. But no, I mean, speaking to the idea of like, it's not how everybody learns, or even there is a major shortage of skilled tradesmen across the entire United States in any industry. And so, we even now today, having 50 employees, we have very young people coming out of high school making very attractive wages, being our maintenance techs, significantly higher than I would think that the average, typical business graduate is getting. And so I would just encourage anyone and support the trades to say, not only like, I think there was a gap in time where it wasn't as lucrative or wasn't looked on as positively. It was, vocational schools, and they kind of got a stigma, but there's great opportunity in it. And if it's something that plays well into your natural aptitude, it's a great way to make some money.
That's absolutely phenomenal. Now, you are partnered with your brother. I've, interviewed a lot of husband-wife duos over the years, but I don't know that I've interviewed anyone who is in partnership with their sibling. What is that dynamic like? How does that work?
So it's great. Like we have had the opportunity of growing up together, building businesses together, working together. So as of today, there are three partners. There's myself, my brother, and our third partner named Coleman. And so, but me and my brother and my third partner Coleman, we don't argue. We all have similar mindsets on how we look at business and life, and we're in similar kind of stages of life, and all have young kids and happily married, and so it just works really well together. And when there is disputes or debates, it's more about like state your idea, and whoever makes the best point will go with that. But our roles and responsibilities break out as my technical title is CEO, my brother COO, and our partner Coleman CFO. I think a better way to describe that is I push the company forward. My brother cleans up the mess that creates with clearly defined systems and processes. And then Coleman keeps track of all of it. And so we have grown this business together, and any of us couldn't do it without the other ones. So it's been a really great partnership.
That's really cool. Back in my hometown in California, there's a partnership, and they go back to they were childhood friends, and they talk about what they were talking about in third grade, and it's really endearing because they've been business partners now for decades, and they've been successful. And to your point, their kids, happily married, they had families that they raised together and such, and so that's a very unique and special dynamic. What do you think allows you? Is there a shared? You mentioned the mindset. I would imagine there's some shared values. Is there shared faith? Like, what is it? Because that's a lot of glue that keeps something like that together in this day and age.
Yeah, I think the core values that we've set for our company are all ingrained in the three partners that founded the company. And so ours are driven, reliable, continuously improving, team-oriented, and always do the right thing. So when we hire today, and we have about 50 employees, we hire majority on values alignment and the minority on competency. And so I think that those values are what keeps not only the partnership strong, but our organization at 50 employees strong, because if we don't embody them, it doesn't work, but also if our team doesn't embody them. So we're always hiring based on those values. So those would be some that were top of mind when we were creating the core values for our organization.
I love that. You can always go back to those just major waypoints that's so imperative in everything that we do in life. Now, we were talking off air about some of the sweet spots of, investing in commercial real estate. And my gosh, you and I have seen a lot of crazy things taking place over the last few years, especially. I mean, we even span, last 15, 20, I could go back 25 years, but we can span time. The last few years have been really interesting. And I'd say the last, 12 months have been very interesting, and it's going to get a little bit spicier coming on up. So as people are, looking to place a private investment with someone, what are some of the key questions that you think they should be asking?
No, I appreciate the question. And I think if I was boiling it down to one question you should ask, it's like, if you're a limited partner considering a general partner, you can ask them, what is your core competency? Or you can research online to try to figure that out. And so I think you asked me, who are you at the very beginning? I intentionally worded as, I am an owner operator that happens to use syndication. And there's a reason I word it that way, is because I see myself as a active real estate investor that is great at on-site operations and forcing appreciation into multifamily assets that we own and reposition in Cincinnati, Ohio. We did that for 8 years without raising money from investors. And then we made the decision to begin raising. But there are a lot of sponsors and general partners who their core competency is sales, marketing, and raising money. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you just got to know, like, what is the dynamic? What is the partnership that you're looking for? And my opinion is there needs to be someone on the team that has that operational component to execute, because as we go into the next recessionary environment, there, in my opinion, is nothing that weathers that storm better than really quality on-site operations. And I think that's applicable to industrial, hotel, office, retail, multifamily, whatever you're in. at the end of the day, financial returns are supported by on-site operations. And then one step further, on-site operations are supported by the people who work there. So you have to ask these questions of like, what are your core competencies? How are you building this team? What are their core values? These types of things are really important questions.
It's imperative. And Conscious Investor, we've been on the phone before talking about things of this nature. And I always say, my company always partners. And I have 2 companies that I partner with, one on the assisted living side of life and one on the multifamily side of life. And they're vertically integrated. They are operations. But I come in and I bring the investors. To your point, it's like my core competency. Like, yes, do I think and do I have confidence I could, effectively operate multifamily? Yes. Assisted living, I would never go that alone ever. I would never go that way alone. There's so many moving parts on that. But all that to say is like, but that's not my sweet spot. And we always like to play in the zone of genius and finding out, like making sure that all the players are in the right spot. And then you have something that is solid and sure-footed.
Well, I would think that, not knowing your business too well, I think your zone of genius is making the connection between those important components, right? The limited partner and the operational side, and making that synergy happen, because it's not always the easiest thing to find that synergy and find that connection. And so that's where you're adding value. But I think, you use the term vertical integration, and like I'm using the term core competency of operations. And I think that becomes so commonplace, and a lot of people say it, we're vertically integrated. And what does that actually mean? And as your conscious investor is trying to make that interpretation, maybe not being as versed in commercial real estate, it's like, I always say, like, if someone says they're good at operations, the follow-up question that you could ask are like, what are the KPIs that show you that you're good at operations? Like, what KPIs are you tracking? And you could even dig into specific things, like if you wanted to say, what are your leasing KPIs? What are your maintenance KPIs, right? Like, if you're not tracking those, then you're probably not that good at operations. So I think that's a great follow-up question to say, like, well, how do you know that you're great at operations? What KPIs, what metrics? And I'd be happy to share a couple of examples of what we do, but I'll take your guidance on what would be of value to the listener.
Yeah, go for that. And KPIs, key performance indicators, just conscious investors. Sometimes we throw things around, and I love that. Like, in going back to being vertically integrated, exactly. Like, yeah, sometimes I can even throw that around conscious investor, and it's like, hey, is everything in-house? Are we managing this in-house? Is operations taken care of by the same people? Or is it a third party that's coming and taking care of it? I love control. And I'm not afraid to say that. I think, investments go way better when the control is held in the house, and there isn't any lag or between communications. And I'll tell you what, you and I know, you've seen it. I know you've seen it, even though you haven't chosen to go this path ever, I'm sure. But when there's a third party involved, like, nobody's going to care for the property the way you are going to care for it. They're not going to care about, like, on the assisted living side of things, are they actually going to be, negotiating with MCOs, for a higher rate? These are really important things. Nobody's going to care about it like you care about it. So I'm so with you on keep it in-house. So important.
Yeah. I mean, loving the control part is like, I think you should be looking for general partners who do like that control, because that's part of their responsibility in the partnership, is to control the aspects of the operations, or control the outcome at least. And so for us, when we say vertically integrated, we not only have our property management company, we have our whole construction arm of our business. So obviously, going back to my roots and kind of how we started and what are those things that we have a competitive advantage on, we've grown off of that as well. And so when we buy a 100+ unit apartment community and we go in and we spend $15,000 to $20,000 per unit renovating, that's all done by our W-2 employees rather than vendors. So we control the components of the renovation. Even we have 6 full-time cleaners on staff, right? People who clean the units after they're done rather than vendoring that out. And we talked about KPIs, and I'll kind of piggyback on what I just said and tie it into the KPI comment. So the industry of real estate will a lot of times focus on a KPI or a metric of vacancy, right? It's a huge component of how we make money, right? If it's vacant, you're not making money. If it's occupied, you are. But we actually choose to break vacancy down into 3 separate components. So for us, because we're vertically integrated, we say from the time the resident moves out to the time the construction starts, that's bucket 1. And then from the time the construction starts to the time the construction finishes, that's bucket 2. And then construction finish to the time the resident moves in, that's bucket 3. There's different people in our organization that are responsible for each of those components of vacancy. So then we can reverse engineer KPIs to each of those buckets and hold our team accountable. So something I'm really proud of is like, we're doing, $15,000 to $20,000 per unit renovation. So this is like the whole kitchen, the whole bathroom, all the flooring, lighting, full paint, but mostly cosmetic, not moving walls around. And over 2023, of the hundreds and hundreds of renovations we did, we averaged 3.5 days on the renovation side, because all of it's in-house, because we can control those components. And so our vacancy is so strong because we have a high degree of control and trust between those departments, to where our leasing team, who's leasing the unit, can have faith in the date that the project manager puts in, as soon as the first resident gives their notice to leave. And so we're very good at compressing the time from the resident moving out to the resident moving in, and everybody working together.
Yeah, once you have that trust established and everyone's working so synergetically, it's just magic for a company all the way around. What are you doing? Class C value add? B, like, where are you at? Like, I'm a firm like a B or better type investor, and I don't do any heavy lifting. It's always very light value add. Maybe we'll go into heavy lifting down the road, but right now that's not the jam. So like, what is it? What kind of assets are you guys investing in?
Yeah, I mean, typically we're buying distressed assets, and distress comes in many shapes and sizes, as you know. Sure. For us, it's usually could be boiled down into 2 components: property management, so poor management being executed, and the need for renovation. And so our renovations usually aren't like heavy lifts, but maybe, I guess that's a relative term, right? Because 2 years ago, we bought a 243 unit off of foreclosure, and 100 of them were vacant. So that one was a pretty heavy lift, but we're not
more of an economic. That's more of like an economic lift, like a management side of things, versus, hey, we've got to go in there and do massive reno, or was it a combination?
They're both, yeah. But so to answer your question on like C or B class, I'm in the Midwest here in Cincinnati, Ohio. The average rent for our market is going to be about $1,300, and the average rent within our portfolio is right around $1,300 as well. And so I don't know if you would call the average being C, or would you call the average being B, but these are all renovated units that attract a good resident base. So if anything, I would say we try to buy probably C assets and force the appreciation to try to get them to what most people would call B.
So where are you guys headed? What do you want to, I mean, you're still at the beginning. When I think about, when I was in my 30s, I'm like, gosh, I mean, like, you're still at the beginning of this. Like, where do you want to go? Like, there's a question that we ask, and it's, to what end? Like, what does success actually look like? Okay. And am I shifting the goalposts on me? Is there an end line? Is there a destination? Like, what does that look like for you?
I mean, one way I answered this question for our organization, have you ever heard of the book Vivid Vision?
Yeah, Cameron was on the podcast a couple of years ago.
So I read his book many years ago, and I said, like, that sounds like a great idea. As our company's growing, I have to figure out how to adjust my leadership style. I was very hands-on, but as you grow, you can't be. And so you try to figure out how you're going to do that. And so I thought, oh, great, Vivid Vision. And so I tried to follow the structure of his book, but ended up evolving into something very, I guess, much more. So I ended up drafting what looks like a magazine. Like, I wrote it in magazine format, as if someone came into our company 3 years into the future and wrote a review of who we are, how it feels, everything that Cameron, says in that book. And so we printed those out. They look and feel like real magazines, and we distribute that to our team. We give that to anyone who interviews. We distribute that to investors so they know where we're headed. And that's cast out 3 years into the future. And so, we're not looking 10 years down the road and all this thing, but it's extremely detailed of how we'll operate, what we're targeting to do. But I think how a lot of, I answered it through that Vision magazine, which I'd be happy to provide the electronic link to it, and you can put it in the show notes. But I think a lot of groups will say, we're going to grow by this many units or this much revenue. And I try not to direct our company on that. I direct more on process. So I say, we're going to have this many conversations with real estate brokers. We're going to do this many in-persons. We're going to try to underwrite this many deals. If it results in 0 acquisitions, fine. If it results in 1 a month, that would be great too. So one thing I feel privileged on is we did start very early. So we have a long time horizon. We don't have to be buying. And we're in a very sweet spot at about 1,400 units where we don't have a ton of overhead on the acquisitions and investor relations side, but we do have the organizational structure to support what we already have. So I'm really happy with where we're at. What comes into the future is doing more of the same thing, getting more systematized, more process that allows me to delegate more of my responsibilities. And ultimately, my goal is to remove myself from my organization. I think that's very far on the horizon, but I've always said to all of our team, my job is to find my replacement and build the processes that will allow that transition to be very easy. And so that's what we're working on doing.
That's it's super fascinating. It's an interesting process. Now, if you don't have a deadline, you don't have a time when you want this to happen, it'll just go on in perpetuality. It'll just be that'll be interesting. Conscious Investor, do you want to add? Vivid Vision, we'll drop a link to that episode with Cameron Harold. And in that episode show notes, you'll be able to click on his Vivid Vision that he has for himself, as well as the Vivid Vision he has with his wife. And they created one together. So the whole concept is a short read. It's easy to follow along and it's easy to implement in your life. And then, to Jered's point, you can extrapolate and make it your own. It's not like, oh, this is the formula and this is the only way to do it. Take that and use that as that springboard, the catalyst to create the vision that you have for your life. I think it's so great.
Yeah. And Julie, I am working on the next version of that. So 2025 to 2028 kind of time block. Because we're already 2.5 years into what I drafted, 2.5 years ago. And one thing that was really fun is at the company holiday party. So 2 years into that Vision magazine, we went through, and our company colors are blue. So we went through and highlighted everything in there blue that we felt we had accomplished, and left everything else in either white or gray or whatever the text color was. And it was just a really celebratory moment to say 70% of this book is blue, right? And for me, that was really meaningful because when I wrote it, most of it had not happened. And so for me, you kind of said, if you don't put deadlines, for me, I'm moving that kind of goalpost every 3 years, but really enjoying who I'm becoming along the way. And so, this next version that I'm working on drafting now is there's different things in it, right? And I know my own personal goals to eventually kind of allow the team to thrive without me. And so more of that comes in each version, and I slowly move it towards that. But I think a way to kind of piggyback on what Cameron does a much better job of saying in Vivid Vision is a successful life is one that is lived where the actions align with your intentions. And so I do that both personally and professionally, and try to kind of refocus it every 3 years.
It's really phenomenal. And it's also really exciting. There are a lot of people who they will say, because I have a lot of friends that are, I'm in the middle years of life. So I've got friends that are much older than me also. And, it's oh, these young people coming up, they don't have it. And I'm just I always tell people, I'm we're going to be in great hands. We're in great hands when we're older. There are amazing people coming up. Don't stress yourself out at all about it. And even just hearing your story, so exciting to see the thoughtfulness that you have built this business, with your brother and other partners. That level of intentionality is role model status. It's something that Conscious Investor, you and I should learn from and be affirmed by, and, to stay on that course of being intentional with what we're creating and developing in life.
The hardest part of that is taking the time to define your intentions, right? Like, so that magazine that I drafted took me months, right? Like and not being a strong writer, but I wanted it in my voice. I didn't want to hire a ghostwriter. Like, I wanted it to be from me. And so there was days where I sat there with kind of like my hand in my palm in front of the computer, trying to think of how to get the right words for my vision to then empower the team to reverse engineer and build what I was trying to build. That's hard, right? And it's equally as hard in your personal life. And I've done much of the same thing personally, where I say, how do I want my kids to view me? How do I want to show up as a husband? What does my health and wellness look like in the future? And how do I take the consistent actions? It's time consuming. Sometimes there's other things that push it out of the way. And so I think the hardest part is just carving out the time and intention to say, no, I'm going to think about this, and I'm going to either put it down on paper or whatever your format is. A lot of people just miss that.
It's so fascinating. I have been, I recently listened to, based upon a mentor in my life who suggested the book, Big Magic Thinking. Sorry, no, I'm not going to remember. David Schwartz. But it's a fantastic book. I'll have to look it up to make sure I have the title correctly. But it was written in the 50s. I've been referencing this Conscious Investor. You've heard me reference this book so many times now over the last few months, but it's such a powerful book. It's timeless truths. And one of the elements that he emphasizes throughout this book is, and my mentor says the same thing, you must take time to think, just to think. He's like, you must have time on your calendar every week. He's extraordinarily successful. You must have time on your calendar every week just to sit and think. So I've been prioritizing this over maybe the last month specifically. And it's amazing what happens when you just, like, for high performers, right? Giving ourselves permission, like, no, I'm actually being productive by sitting here, looking out the window and allowing myself space to think. It's insane.
Yeah. I think for me, the most effective is being outside, moving, whether it's running or walking or hiking or whatever. And, some people it's taking a shower or whatever, but just that space, right? And the more intentional you are about creating it, which is also hard to do in today's world, you're just busy. But yeah, carving out that time and making that space.
Yeah, so important. This is kind of an interesting question, and maybe you've read it. Now I'm going to have to look over Donald Miller's book. Oh, goodness. It was sitting right over here on my pile of books, and I'm trying to think of, gosh, it was so good. He's written so many great books, but in this book, he has you actually write out your eulogy. Have you ever written out your eulogy?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Do you read it? Really?
No, I haven't. I think I write it and then I'm like, that's hopefully very far in the future. And so then I start to try to chunk it down into more immediate actions. Right. But it's kind of like what I said before of like, how do I want my kids to view me? Those are the types of things that are going to show up in eulogies, not my net worth or something like that. And so when I have taken the time to say, like, I'm not a big person about legacy. I don't really care too much, but it's kind of like the impression that I want to make on, the people who are most important to me. And a lot of the goal setting or the intentionality follows around that. And so that was a practice that I tried. I gave it a shot and I would say it was very helpful, but it's not one that I revisit consistently. Like, let me read this eulogy and it's going to change my life. But I think it's a good just kind of thought process.
It's a good thought process. You touched on a word, and as a conscious investor, I'm very clear. A lot of people are trying to leave behind generational wealth, and they feel like that is legacy wealth or such. That's not a belief. I believe in transferable wealth, like your wisdom, knowledge, experience. And it doesn't just go to our kids, it goes to everybody in the world. And so I'm curious, when you mention legacy wealth, like, what does that mean to you? And well, let's start there. What does that mean to you?
So if you're saying legacy in wealth or the financial legacy, it means not a ton to me. Like, I mean, I am motivated by money and money is important to me and the impact it can make is important, but leaving something behind is not as important. I mentioned I have a really great upbringing, but to give you some context, like I did not have air conditioning growing up, and I was born in the 90s, right? So like I didn't have the most means growing up, and I'm not raising my kids to expect what I have built financially to pass to them. What's more meaningful to me, and like when I think about our company, all over our office and how our team is hired and directed, is our mission is we deliver the feeling of home. So Julie, I mentioned that, we have 1,400 apartments. That means there's several thousand people that live under, the properties that we own and manage. So the feeling of home is things like stability, belonging, respect, acceptance. And so if we can deliver those feelings to thousands of people through a business that gives a stable home life, the legacy that I hope to leave is not one where my name is imprinted on it, but they were given a stable home life like I was given to then go out and do good things, because I'm very much a kid that could have gone the wrong direction, right? But because I had a great upbringing, a great household, great parents, a stable home to build off of, I'm very fortunate to the position I've gotten in. And so I have the privilege as a landlord to step up to that legacy, to step up to that plate and have that impact. And it gets a little bit of like woo woo, but at the same time, it's like, if you can give someone a stable household, what good can they have on our communities, but then ultimately the world? And at 2,000 people, I think we'll never know, but I'm optimistic to say it's large. So I'm happy not knowing, but I'm happy to step up to the plate and continue to try to leave that legacy.
That deeply resonates. That's why I always tell investors, like, this is a win-win-win, because when we can create everything you just said, like if we can create this stability, if we can impact these lives, people show up better in the world. They're going to be better at their work. They're going to be better in their relationships. Like if we can create this opportunity, then it's going to have an impact. And we don't know the net result of that impact. We don't have to, but we can just participate in like putting the little pebbles that start the ripple effect in the pond. So.
Yeah, I'd love to. In that Vision magazine, I actually have a hypothetical example of one of those pebbles that I'd love to share. And so like I use it to help our maintenance team kind of understand the impact of what they're doing, because there are days as a maintenance professional that can be a little bit draining, and you have to remind yourself of what the meaning you're actually doing at work. So in the magazine, I give an example of this hypothetical story that I worked up that says, like, there's this mother who's a nurse, comes home after a 12-hour shift. She pulls into the parking lot. She goes into the apartment, and her fridge that was not working, she submitted a work order for before her shift, is still not working, has melted has thawed out, and all the food in the refrigerator is ruined. So she drops her bags in exhaustion, is frustrated. At that moment, her 4-year-old son runs out of the back bedroom and says, like, "Oh, mommy's home." And in her frustration, she like slams her stuff down, ignores the kid. And I said, the opportunity we have as an organization is to step up to the plate, repair that fridge. And then I give the other hypothetical of like, the kid runs out of the room, says, "Oh, mommy's home." And she picks him up and says, like, "I love you, and I'm glad to be home." What impact does that have, right? We'll never know. But like, in my opinion, you layer up enough of those and it's very meaningful. And that's the opportunity we have. It could be that, it could be, a newlywed couple just having a calm night at home to watch a movie and not have a loud neighbor. Small things like that make a big impact, and I'm sure of it.
Deeply resonates. That is the ethos of a conscious investor right there. Like that is a huge part of it on the actual investing side of things. I appreciate that. As we wrap up, my gosh, the time has flown. What a great conversation, and I appreciate your time, Jered. What are the best ways if the conscious investor wants to reach out to you and just learn, about opportunities that you may have available? Like, what's the best way for them to connect up?
Well, the best way would be through our website. So SNSCapitalGroup.com. That's going to be the best way to get in touch with me.
That's awesome. All right. Well, Jered, thank you again for coming. Thanks for a great conversation and lots of insights. And it's exciting to see your success. And I'm so excited to see where, actually I just need to have a copy, the next version of the magazine, the next publication. That's all I need. And then I'll know where you're going.
Yes. Well, I appreciate it. And I'll send over a link to the one that we're currently working on, right? So you can see what we did with Cameron's book and how we converted it into our own thing. It might give everyone some help. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share the story. I enjoyed the conversation as well.
That's awesome. Conscious Investor, thank you so much. And remember, the show grows organically. If you've enjoyed this conversation, if you've gained something from it, I'm sure there's somebody that came to your mind, or maybe there was a particular insight that stood out to you. And it would mean just mean the world if you would take a moment and share that either with a friend that came to mind or on a social platform, however you can. But sharing is how the show grows. And it's absolutely free for you to do that. So if you don't mind, take a moment and support the show by sharing out this episode to people in your network. Until next time, cheers to your health, your mindset, and your wealth.